Ashes of War are essential in making Elden Ring's combat fun, engaging, and exciting. There are 91 Ashes of War in the base game, and Shadow of the Erdtree added 25, making a solid 116 Ashes of War that you can choose from in any given playthrough to match any given playstyle that you have. Now, not every one of the 116 Ashes of War are good. With that many, there's bound to be some duds, but in this video, I'm going to go over the top 10, or what I think are the top 10 best Ashes of War in Elden Ring. This list is made after thousands of hours of testing, playing, and enjoying the game. If you have a favorite Ash of War that is not on here, that's okay. There are only 10 in the top 10, and this is what I think is universally good in-game, as well as what makes up my own personal top 10 Ashes of War in Elden Ring. So get ready, Tarnished, because I think I've put together a really solid list of Ashes of War that are S tier in Elden Ring, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, in slot number 10 is an Ash of War that I only recently started using and absolutely fell in love with. To be more specific, I was using the Iron Ball and the Ash of War Endure. Even though the buff Endure only lasts for 3 seconds, in that 3 seconds you are going to increase all of your absorptions by 45% and raise your poise like crazy against all attacks. In my testing and playing, I have figured out that I can pretty much tank any move and use a heavy charged R2 right after the Ash of War's activation in order to break the enemy's stance. This skill is only going to cost 9 FP to use, and even though you are going to tank a little bit of damage once you receive the hit while you are using Endure, the ability for you to snap back into action and start attacking right away cannot be overlooked. Now, the skill cap for this Ash of War in terms of when to use it and when to attack right afterwards can be a little bit high, but once you get the rhythm going, you are able to tank hits using Endure, attack, and then keep moving around tanking hits while being able to whittle the boss's health down incredibly fast, and I think this is a really fun way to play. In spot number 9, we're going to be looking at Dryleaf Whirlwind. This is an Ash of War that came to us in the DLC and can be used with the Dryleaf arts, and it is absolutely phenomenal. It is one of the only Ash of War that I continually use against Malenia because it has the ability to stun lock her so she cannot attack. Being able to jump up in the air, hitting the enemy with a triple kick followed by a 4th massive downward strike is going to be able to deal 28 stance damage, and with 2 of these particular Ashes of War activation, you can typically break an enemy's stance, allowing you to get off a critical and build some really fun builds around this. You are also going to render most enemies useless until you get to the really big bosses or dragons, and you're also going to get a lot of hyper armor once you start activating this Ash of War. I don't think I've ever been knocked out of the air unless I get hit by something really big, so typically once activation starts, you're going to be in the clear to get off every single portion of the Ash of War to deal as much damage as possible. In slot number 8, we have another Shadow of the Erdtree Ash of War, and that is going to be Flame Spear. Flame Spear is a decent Ash of War, allowing you to get a lot of range with the new projectile fire beam you can shoot out, and it will also ignite your weapon with 95 fire damage for 40 seconds. Now, where things get insane is if you put a Faith build with this Ash of War and use a Flame Art affinity, making your weapon scale with Faith. This causes you to deal serious damage and snipe most medium and small enemies with ease. You are also going to be able to charge this Ash of War, which means the Godfrey icon is going to come into play, and this Ash of War is going to complement any fire build well and will add a different playstyle to your arsenal with the ranged Flame Spear aspect of this Ash. I find this Ash of War incredibly fun to use, and the amount of damage you can pour out onto bosses with it is exceptional. Carian Sovereignty is in our 7th spot, and it's the only thing allowing me to overlook that Rolana didn't get a cutscene before you fight her. Carian Sovereignty is a godsend to intelligence players because when you get this Ash of War set up correctly, you can devastate bosses, NPCs, or normal enemies with an Elden Ring. This 2-part Ash of War causes you to charge up like Carian Grandeur, but then perform a sweeping horizontal strike in front of you, dealing huge damage. And with your Godfrey icon equipped, adding an extra 50% charge attack damage, and your magic infusion on the weapon allowing you to deal 20% more damage than the Frost affinity, you are going to blow through your enemy, dealing 48 48 stance damage at the full charge, and then the follow-up swing is going to deal 45% stance damage, dealing a total of 93 stance damage to your enemy, which is absolutely ridiculous. But stance damage is not the only type of damage you're going to do. In fact, if you have this Ash of War set up correctly, when fully charged and both parts of the Ash of War hit, you're going to be doing well over 8,000 damage to bosses. Slot number 6 goes to Wing Stance. This Ash of War changed how we viewed what is possible in Elden Ring through your Ash of War, and it provides an extremely fun way to play the game. Having two different options for your stance to either go heavy attack and lunge up into the air dealing 30 stance damage, or using the light attack variation and dealing 16 stance damage, this Ash of War makes you feel like you are pressing a bunch of different combo buttons as you are weaving in and out of heavy and light attacks, building up status effects, shredding through your enemy, and looking insanely cool in the process. The damage this Ash of War can provide is only going to be boosted by Rellana's cameo, and because of this, any stance Ash of War is immediately going to benefit, causing stance builds to become some of the best in Elden Ring. Wing Stance has the ability to make you hit hard, easy to deal out damage, and give you a playstyle that's fast or slow depending on how you want to be playing, but it will remain engaging and fun to use, which is why this Ash of War is in this spot on our top 10. The next Ash of War is one of my all-time favorites in the game. It's used by my favorite build type, and it's incredibly good. This Ash of War is Cragblade. Coating your weapon with a rock-like substance, you become a stance-breaking machine, blowing through bosses' poise with amazing ease. Cragblade is going to supply your weapon with 15% physical attack power, 10% stance damage, and 50% extra damage to blocking enemies. It is for sure my absolute favorite weapon buff, and if you didn't know, the initial slam is where you can actually get a little bit more damage when you slam your fist or weapon into the ground, pulling it up, and if your enemy is close enough, they will take a little bit of damage. For 16 FP, this 60-second weapon buff is going to be one of the best in the entire game. Usually with Cragblade equipped, you're going to be able to do 2 heavy charged R2s, allowing you to break stances and make some really fun critical strike builds. Now, Giant Hunt is going to take our 4th slot, and there possibly isn't another Ash of War that breaks the game as much as this one does. This Ash is going to take even the most ridiculously hard bosses like Melania and just make her crumble against Giant Hunt. Giant Hunt thrusts your weapon into the air, causing fantastic damage, and usually throws your opponent high up into the air, stun locking them, allowing you to pretty much walk through Elden Ring with an unusual amount of ease. If you use a great sword with this Ash of War, which I highly suggest that you do, you will deal 36 stance damage, and if this Ash of War is used correctly, you will just keep smashing your enemy up in the air, causing them to be completely useless in a fight. I absolutely love Giant Hunt, and it's been one of the most fun Ashes of War to play, because typically anything that makes the game easier is just going to make the game better in my opinion. Now we're getting into the top 3, and to start our top 3, we have Square Off. This could technically be ranked with the other stance Ashes of War, but Square Off was OP before Rellana's cameo ever came into the picture, so it has its own slot. Square Off does so much damage and breaks enemies' poise incredibly easy. My favorite thing to do with this Ash of War is to run a strength build and completely run through bosses and the game. There are 2 versions of the Square Off stance, a light attack that swings upward that can come out incredibly fast, or a charging stab attack for a heavy version of the attack. Both versions cost almost no FP to use, and the damage and stance damage you get from that cost is crazy. Being able to short circuit and break the game is the goal after all, and Square Off is going to be a super easy way to do that. What's even crazier is that you can start the game with this Ash of War and never use anything else the entire time you play. It may not be the most interesting way to play Elden Ring, but it will be one of the most effective. At slot number 2, we have Golden Vow. This was a sleeper for me, but when I think about it, anytime I can't use the incantation version, I typically always end up putting it on a dagger, and it becomes one of my buffs for whatever build I am using if I don't have the extra faith. Now, to have an Ash of War be almost essential for the game definitely rewards it a slot in our top 10. Now, even though the Ash of War isn't better than the incantation, it still can give you 11.5% extra damage and 7.5% damage negation. Doing more damage and taking less damage is always fantastic, and it's pretty much for free. That damage and damage negation is a great buff for something that can just go on a dagger in your pocket and is pretty much free damage, and that's always something nice in Elden Ring. You also get this Ash of War in Limgrave, allowing you to become rather broken pretty quickly, especially if you are setting up a build and need a little bit of extra damage. This Ash is going to be a must for almost every single build in the game. And now for the best Ash of War in the entire game, at the very front of our top 10, I am putting Royal Knight's Resolve. I know some people may not agree with me here, but that is okay. Royal Knight's Resolve is an Ash of War that allows your next attack to hit for 80% increased damage. And as we always say in Elden Ring, free damage is always a good thing, and Royal Knight's Resolve is going to be a fantastic source of that damage. Now, I will say that this is a mind-numbing way to play, hitting and then buffing and then hitting and then buffing, and it can get very boring really fast since the Ash of War only procs on one weapon hit. But Royal Knight's Resolve can stack with all the other buffs you have on, allowing you to do some really fun one-shot builds or get a crazy amount of damage out fast. Either way, you cannot really go wrong with this Ash of War, and when paired with the right build and talismans, you are going to absolutely be unstoppable against bosses. And that is going to be it, guys, for our top 10 Ashes of War in Elden Ring since the release of Shadow of the Erdtree. If you disagree with any of these, definitely leave it down in the comments below. I would love to hear your top 10 as well. And if you agree with me, let me know which ones you agree with. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching until the very end. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification to come back for more content. And until next time, guys, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.